to our BRG event. Some of you may wonder what's a BRG. A BRG is one of the ways that SSM Health has created for all of our employees to feel as though they belong. So today at one of our first events, we are honored to have Angela De Silva, a long-time St. Louis-based president, to be with us today to present her one-woman show. A little bit about Angela. She is a St. Louis-based cultural preservationist, independent historian, educator, a playwright, a performer, and a pioneer of Black history tourism. She was born in Missouri, and she grew up in a semi-rural area in St. Charles County. She is a descendant from slaves, and today we are honored to see her perform her one-woman show called Lila, the Life of a Missouri Slave. Thank you so much.
In times like these, you need a savior. In times like these, you need an anchor. Be sure. Y'all can't tell Mrs. Y'all seen me with that book. Mrs. No, I know how to read. She do something terrible to me. When our little girl on a farm down in Mississippi, Billy, the coachman, when him not driving, Master and Mrs., him got to work in the big house just like the rest of us do. One day, he was dusting down the parlor. Him just rise up, Master newspaper, to get the dust from underneath. That when Mrs. walk in the door, she see that newspaper Billy had, she run and tell Master Billy in there reading. Master come in all fired up, had him drug out to the barn, strung him up, cut him thumbs off. Said no Negro of his was ever gonna learn how to read. This morning when I waked up, the ghost of my pappy was standing there by my bed, and I looked at him. He looked pretty much like the last time I seen him, and then I think, when was the last time I seen him? Oh, it was many years ago. Summer morning, early, but already hot. Master come down to the quarters and he say to my mama, he say, Mammy, can her go to town with me today? My mama say, well, Master, what time you gonna be back? Him say, us gonna be back by sunset. My mama said, well, I guess I'll go with you then. All excited because I never been in the wagon before, and Master tell me to climb up there behind him, and off us go, out the gate and down the road. Past a field, I see my pappy and my sisters, and I say, bye y'all, I go into town with my... He didn't even look up. Now I realize he must have known something. My sisters, they do like this. Us get to town. Town a really big place, just like they said it was. A lot of buildings, a lot of people, a lot of comings and goings, and Master pull up from one of them buildings, tell me, get down. I get down and us go inside, and no sooner than Master get in the door, whole bunch of white folks come around him, talking to him all at once, like keeping up a heap of noise. Go stand over there on the table. I go stand like him say, and then all them white people come around me, raising up my dress, my skin, looking at my eyes and my teeth. And this go on a while. Then directly, this big fella come from another room, and he stand there by the table, and he say, y'all don't have time to inspect her. You say that she's sound a limb. They say her mammy can do the work of two men. You might just want to bid on her because you got somebody here that ain't got no bad habits yet, and you can teach them to do things your way. Well, sir, then he start crying me off. Bidding gonna start at $300, and then $325, $350, $375, $400, and it go like that till it get all the way up to $700. But I not know what that mean then. Then Master come over, set me on the floor, take me by the hand, hand me to another white man. He say, this your new master now, you got to go with him. I say, I can't go with him. You tell Mammy, us gonna be back by sunset. I can't go with him. And he slapped me down to the floor, jerked me up by my dress and said, listen, you little ignorant savage, I done sold you. One more word, and I was gonna beat you here. Your new master get you he place, he gonna beat you again. One more word. Well, as it turned out, That was the last time. Ever see my mama, my papa? None of my kinfolk ever again. That man that buyed me that day, I was with him till I get some size, maybe 12-ish. And he get upon hard times and got to sell me and some of his other niggers. That when I go to old man Jackson's. Old man Jackson say he need a nursemaid for his childrens. I think they gonna be little childrens. I get there, they big as I is. I got to get up before first light, get water balls so everybody get cleaned up when they get up. Get Master Coffee on. Then I have to get the girls up, comb and brush their hair, make sure their dresses is nice and iron. And then I have to get them their morning meal, and I got to do all that before that man get there from town to give them their lessons. Then when him get there, we all go to the back parlor. And I sit by the big window where the light good. This is the time of the day that I have to do all my sewing. Mrs. say I got a good hand for someone to be so young, but I act like I is so busy sewing. But I be watching what that man be doing with his hands. He say, this a A, this a B, and this a C. But I so busy sewing, can't let him know that I'm paying no attention to what's going on. But that night, when I put the girls to bed, you see, I sleep in their room, on the floor, in front of the door. I make sure they good and sleep, and I crawls across the floor, and there in the fireplace ash, I did what that man did that day. He said, this was a A, and this a B, and this a C. And sometimes, when we get into them woods, I be all night long trying to get them right. Next thing I hear, cock-a-doodle-doo. Got to get rid of it. Don't know what they do to me if they find out I'm teaching myself how to read and write. Well, the girls grow up. That oldest one, she real bossy. She'll find me wherever I is and say, Lila, we're going to play school today and you got to come. See, I can't play with you. Your mammy said I got to get all this washing done today. I can't play with you. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to tell Mother, and she's probably going to beat you. I act like it's the hardest thing in the world for me to sit there and play school. She got one of them blackboard things, you know, and she writes up on it and turn it to her sister and say, what this is? Her sister say, that C-A-T, that cat. She said, that right, that good, that real good. She wipe it off, you know, and then she writes something else on it and turn it to me. Lila, what this is? I don't know. What this is? I don't know what this is. She say, you sure is dumb. She say, that D-O-G, that dog. No, it ain't. Yes, it is. D-O-G is dog. No, it ain't. I done seen a dog. I know what a dog look like, and that ain't no dog. She said, well, don't look like no dog. This is how it tricks them. I can read as fine as anybody in that house, but I can't ever let them know it. The girls grow up, go off to boarding school, and I have to go with them. I still has to keep them nice and ironed, but ain't nobody watching me all day. I done read a lot of big books, know where my people come from. I done read their Constitution, and I know this ain't right. So they grow up, get married, and come home and start families of their own. I do too. I have myself 2 beautiful baby girls. They're the only good thing in my life. I love combing and brushing their hair and telling them stories that I read in books. Well, sir, now that the girls has grown up, I don't work in the big house no more. I go to the field just like the rest of the slaves, but I don't go to the field, what they call the kitchen field. It's the closest one to the house, and my job is to raise the fruits and vegetables and the herbs that we're gonna need. So before sunlight, all of us, when it rings the bell, get in line to go to our field, go to the field. My baby girls are up, and they walk me to the gate each morning. Mrs. don't want no colored cheering past her gate. Well, sir, each morning they say, bye, mama, bye, mama. And I said, look at here. Y'all be good cheerings here. Don't let Master and Mrs. say nothing to you. And you better mind Mammy Lou. Don't want no bad poke when I get back here. Understand me? They say, yes, it must be good. Guess it had to be about noontime. And I look up, rider's coming. 5 or 6 white men tie their horses to master front porch, and master come out and say something to them, and then everybody go inside. I pay no never mind, because white folks come and go all day long. But that night, when they rings the bell for us to come in, I get to the gate, no baby girls. My children meet me every night when I come in. And I thought, maybe they just done played themselves upon a nap. I go looks in my cabin, no girls. I started looking for them all around the quarters, calling them, Annabelle, Leah, where is y'all? Come on in here now, it's almost supper time. No baby girls. Started asking the slaves when they come in from the field. I said, did you see my children out there playing? Did you see them? Nobody seen nothing. And then I thought, Mammy Lou, she the oldest slave on the place. Her job is to watch us youngins while we're in the field. I go to Mammy's place, and she's sitting outside on a log, smoking a pipe all peaceful like. Mammy, I know you done heard me calling. When the last time you seen my children? She just kept sitting there. Old lady, do you hear me talking to you? With that, she get up, put her pipe down on the log. She come over to me, grab my arm real tight, and I'm looking at her. She say, this afternoon, Massa had me send the girls to him. He, what are you saying? Tell me, what are you saying? What do you mean? She said, this afternoon, Master had me send the girls to him. And she said in a real low voice, they never came back. What are you telling me? Where are my children? What are you telling me? She didn't say nothing. She'd just point. My heart fell out right there on the ground, raised my dress, run all back up to the big house, and there are a couple of slaves here working in Mrs. Flower Beds, and I say, yeah, where Master at? Where is he? They said, well, probably around there on the front porch where he is every night time drinking. I get over there, and sure enough, their master, sitting in a big old rocking chair, just rocking and a drinking. Rocking and a drinking. Us can't look at white folks when us talk to them. So I was standing there by the porch and I say, Master, this Lila. Master, where my babies at? Where my girls is? Just kept sitting there, rocking and drinking. Rocking and drinking. Master, please give me my babies. That's all I got. I done everything you asked me to. Oh, Master, please give me my children. But he kept on acting like I wasn't even there, just rocking and a drinking. Finally, I guess I kept up so much noise, he get up out of that chair, and he's still holding a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked down on me and said, I done sold them. And if you don't stop all this cattle waddling, I was going to have you beat and put you in my pocket. And every slave knows if a master say he going to put you in his pocket, what that mean? That mean he going to sell you, turn you into money, something he can put in his pocket. For the first time in my life, I stand straight up and look a white man in his face. I know he can have me killed for that. As far as I'm concerned, though, I already did. I look at him, he look at me, nobody say nothing. I go down to my cabin and can't hardly stand to be in there no more. I see the doll I made for Annabelle and the ribbons that go in Leah's hair, and I just get mad and sad all at the same time and start yelling at God, why you do this? What I done to you? But he don't answer. They sold my children from me, Lord. They stole my children from me. They stole my children from me, Lord. I wish I never was born. Said I wish I never was born. Never had no more children. Couldn't stand the thought of losing them. Well, some years passed, and one morning I was getting ready to go to the field. I hear this knocking in my cabin, and I look up, and their master leaning in the doorway. He said, "Lila, get your stuff together. You coming up to the big house to be the cook, and be quick about it." Well, let me tell y'all something. The old cook up there, she been cook up there since master was a little boy. They say now when she cooks stuff, she put too much of this in it, or she leave that out of it, and they say she burns almost everything, that the food done got right nasty. Master beat her for it, but it not do no good. Doc came from town and look at her, and he tell master, she got the old people mind disease. Send her down to her cabin. She don't know until her rest. Get somebody else up here. Well, master picked me. The old lady, she's supposed to teach me everything her knowed, but believe me, she done forgot most of it. The hardest thing at first it was for me to learn was the difference between flour and sugar. Slaves don't get no flour. We get cornmeal that they grind on the place. We don't get no sugar. We get sorghum during the big times like Christmas and 4th of July. That's the only sweet thing we ever get. But I had to taste them when I first get up there for a while to make sure which is which, because they's both white. Well, sir, within a year and a half, they say I'm one of the best cooks in the county. But I'm going to share a secret with you. I can read Mrs. Cookbooks, and they don't know it. Well, sir, I had been up to the big house maybe 3-4 years, and again, I was in the summer kitchen canning and went to put something on the table, and Lord have mercy, master in the door. Yes, sir. Lila, Saturday after next, gonna be a big doings here, and you got to cook the bestest meal you done ever cooked. Yes, sir. What you want? He said, "Oh, well, I'll have Henry open up the smokehouse and get one of the hams from last fall. They say the crawdads have got real fat down at the creek, so I'll send a boy down there with a pail. So start with gumbo." He said, "And oh, that rum pie that you got the prize for at the fair last summer." Yes, sir. What you want with all that? He said, I don't know. He said, "But you do, and anything that you think I need on my table that night to impress these people, don't care what it is, don't care what it costs, you just tell Mrs. here, she'll send the town for it. Understand me? It's whatever you think that we're going to need." Yes, sir. And he goes, "Oh, it's going to be 12 for dinner, so put the extra leaves in the table and get a couple of girls out of the field. Clean them up. Teach them how to serve white folks that night." Yes, sir. That week, I done everything master tell me to do. That night at supper, I'm standing behind Mrs. Chair like I have to every meal. I look around that table. That dinner went on for over 2 hours. Them white folks ate and ate and ate. And one of them said, "Ooh, I am so full. I don't think I could eat another thing, but bring me another sweet potato biscuit." And it goes on like that. Finally, Mrs. give me the sign to clear the table off. I have the girls clean the table off, and they serve that cake. I goes behind them, and I pours everybody's coffee myself. Last cup of coffee I pours is Mrs. And as I stand there, looking around the table, everybody else, they blow theirs, they stir it, to get the hot out of it. But Mrs. still running her mouth the whole time, not paying no mind to what I do, just kept talking and talking. As I watch her, she pick up that hot cup of coffee. She don't blow it, she don't stir it, still running her mouth, take a big gulp of it, and Lord, she dropped that cup and jumped up. And when I ran to the sideboard to get her a glass of water, and when she seen me, she turned around and slapped me to the floor. Master come around table, grabbed me by my hair, had 2 slave men hold me down while he take that stick and beat me with it so bad. He had to call the doctor. The doctor came and said, "Jackson, as you lost your mind, Lila is too old to be beat like that. I know anybody in the county to give you $2,000 for. $2,000 right here today." And then he looked at me and he winked. "She needs 7 days off of her feet. 7 days and not a day less." Well, sir, I felt fine at 4, but I took the 7. So how come I got master's stick now? Well, you see, Master had his own still on the place. And even as a young man, he drank all day long. Even when I sends his breakfast tray up there, sure enough, better be a big, tall glass of whiskey on it. Doc kept telling him through the years, this ain't doing you no good. You need to stop. You need to stop. He never did. Well, sir, started kind of small, just a few twitches in his fingers. I mean, he could still pick things up, but seemed like in a week they got a lot worse. And so he couldn't even pick up a glass of water without slotching it all over everybody. Well, so we had to start feeding him and holding his head to give him water. Then it started in his head, the shaking. Mrs. Now, she sent for the doctor. The doctor come out and look at Master, and he tell her, I need to see you downstairs in the parlor. They get down there, and he said, he got St. Vitus stance. That liquor that went to his brain. He got about 6 weeks at the most, so you better get his affairs in order. Well, sir, that next 6 weeks or less, my job now, they pull me out in the fields and I take care of Master 24 hours a day. Try to get him to eat, try to keep him clean. That's my job. Overseer kept sending a piece of paper up there saying he really got to see Master. Mrs. right on the bottom of it, no, not today, Master, not having a good day, no. Well, just go on a couple of weeks, and one day Master opened up his eyes. He look around, and he know who I is. But better yet, he remember who he is. Start ordering people around again. Mrs. sent a note to the overseer, come on up, Master can see you today. I standing at the head of the bed, and overseer at the foot, and he ain't got good news. You see, Master knowing another place about 5 miles up the line. That's where he run his prime beeves, his registered cattle. Overseer come telling him he's missing 5 head of that, what they call hereditary stock. As I stand there and Master listen, his hands turn like 3 different colors on that sheet. Then he got himself together and he say, take all the men from here, up there. Big fence around the whole place. 3 men now stayed all the time. I want this done now. That overseer left that very afternoon. About 4 days later, town folk bring that new gate across that Master ordered. Take 6 men to lift that new gate to Master's wagon, and they went on up the line. About 4 or 5 days later, Master opened up his eyes, and as soon as he see me, he said, get me dressed and get my horse. Your horse? Oh, Master, you can't get on that horse. Please, let me have Henry get the buckboard for you. Master, you can't get on that horse. Horse, now. It take 3 of us to get him up there. Henry tell Mrs. he gonna walk behind the horse all the way in case Master fall off. She think that's a good idea. Well, sir, Master get up to the other place, and he rides the line, but then he come across that wagon with that gate still in it. 3 men was standing kind of close, and he said, get over here. You 3 put that gate up now. The men said, oh, Master, that gate real heavy. Let me go get some more people's weight. That gate real heavy. You now. Well, sir, 2 of them get up in the bed of the wagon, and 1 guy on the ground, and 2 in it. They're trying to stand it up, and this thing's wobbling every which way. The man on the ground is reaching up far as he can to try to pull it. And then every once in a while, he'd have to rest. They'd all have to rest because this gate's heavy. Then it gets about 2/3 out of the way. And now all of that weight is on the man on the ground. And he goes, wait a minute. Need to catch my breath. And Master, that he get mad. He get off his horse and start beating the man around the head and shoulders. You ain't working. Start, get working. Well, the man started working, and he let that gate go. That gate fell right smack dab on Master. No. Oh, no. Is he dead? Oh, what is it? What are us gonna do? They're gonna say we did this on purpose. One of them say we need to run. Maybe they don't even know he's up here. Maybe we can get away. Second one goes, nope, I'm not going. You know if we run, they're going to get them hell dogs after us. And every slave know what them hell dogs are. They train to go after runaways, but they also train to rip out your neck. No, he said, go get Mammy Lou. She's going to know what to do. Well, sir, I was mixing up cornbread and happened to look out the kitchen window. What? That can't be. She don't go nowhere. But there she was, Mammy Lou, shuffling down the road. And now as I look, 5 or 6 other enslaved are following her. So I go out on the back porch and I say, what's going on? I don't know. They said something happened to Master. And I go, what happened to Master? Don't know exactly, but they said it's up at the other place. Well, I put down what I'm going and I goes too. We all get up there and sure enough, their Master underneath that gate. Mammy Lou walk all around him this way. Then she walk all around him that way. And then she bend down, take Master eye, take Master other eye, and said, Well, she goes over a little ways, sit down on the ground, take her pipe out of her pocket, put the back in it, tamp it down, light it, and there she sit, all peaceful, like just rocking back and forth. Well, there all of us is waiting for her to tell us what to do. There's Master underneath the gate, and there's Mammy Lou. And we know you can't rush over, we just gonna have to wait. Well, finally, she get done. She put that tobacco out, make sure there's no more fire in there, and put it back in her pocket. She get up again. She walk around where Master lay at. She walk around this way. She bent down, way down, take Master eye, take Master other eye, and then she said, he's still dead. You, go over to the Callaway place, tell the men folk to bring the wagon if something done happened here. You, run up to the big house and tell Mrs. send the doctor out here. And then she said, the rest of y'all, don't be standing around here when the white folks come. It's getting ready to be bad out here. Just as I was getting ready to turn like she said, near my foot and Master's dead hand was that stick he beat me with so long ago. So I reached down, jerk it out of his hand, hide it in my dress, get up to the kitchen, hide it in a loose floorboard. That night, Mammy Lou get everybody together. She said, I got bad news for y'all. While y'all was in the field today, bankers came. Master owed them a whole lot of money, so y'all getting ready to be sold the morning after Master laying out in 2 days' time. She said, so you better get your goodbyes said. She said, I'm probably not going to be sold because I'm old and not worth nothing. She said, but look at here. Y'all better be powerful sad at Master's laying out. You understand me? Because if you ain't, they're going to have Charlie Merrill send y'all down to the cotton fields of Mississippi. He's already on his way, and we know who Charlie Merrill is. He's a slave breeder from Missouri. We don't want nothing to do with him. So 2 days later, they had stretched out in the parlor. All the white folks from the county came, and they had the white folk service, and the preacher was, they getting ready to take him to the graveyard, but they marched us in so we could say our goodbyes. We remember what Mammy said. She said she powerful sad. They think us crying. We're not crying, because we're not sorry he did. Next morning, though, they put us in chains and take us to market. That's how come out here in St. Louis. Miss Pettigrew on a boarding house down on the levee, and she'd tell Charlie Merrill, fetch me back, and didn't care what it cost. She did pay $2,000 for me. Sometime when the boats come in, I might serve 400 people in a day. I sleep on a pallet in the kitchen on the floor, but she do let me have Sunday mornings off to go to church. And last Sunday, Mary Meacham, this freeborn black lady, come whisper in us ears, some of us ears, abolitionist men's gonna be on the river tonight. And if us wants to get away, we need to be at the Bissell Ferry Landing at blue o'clock in the morning. I think about it all week long. I don't know how far freedom is, and I'm an old lady, but I know if I try to run what they're gonna do to me. But my pappy standing by my bed this morning, That was ascending. He telling me it's going to be all right to go. People have given me tips for my cooking, and I've sewed my money in the hem of my dress. I'm going. I don't know how it's going to end up, but I was going, and I made up my mind. I'm going to die free. No more auction blocks for me. No more auction block for me. I done been sold 3 times. Not gonna be no fault. I want to be able to read a newspaper, not worry about my eyes getting poked out or my thumbs cut off. I want to be paid for my cooking. No more auction block for me. Well, it's time for me to go. Sure was nice meeting you people. And if I see you sometime in the future, if you don't wave, I understand. So it's time for me to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we can have Q&A. Any questions? And who can man the online? See if you have any questions.
Well, let me say this while you're waiting. Since I retired, I'm a retired college professor from Lindenwood, and I retired in 23, I think. My days have run together because my husband got very sick, and I couldn't be that far away from him. So I taught slavery at Lindenwood. It was the first time they ventured into that territory, but my classes were always full. I am descendant on Missouri slaves on each side. My great-great-grandmother was Isabel Lackland Reed. She was owned by the Lackland family that owned all the land out at the airport. Isabel, was a wedding present to James Lackland when he got married. We knew that she was born in Kentucky and wondered how she got to Missouri, and that's how. She came with the bride at age 12, a wedding present, okay? That blows my mind, absolutely blows my mind. So I know on both sides of the river, on both sides of the family, where we come from, back 7 generations, though I have a cousin who's traced through his white blood all the way back to 13th century England. But he's got nothing to do, okay? Obviously. My job is the director of the Mary Meacham Underground Railroad site. We were the first in the National Park Service's Network to Freedom program. We have been in for 22 years. As you may know, 2 years ago, now there's 6 sites that are now in this federal program, but we've been in it for 22 years. Mary Meacham, do you know the story? Guess not. May the 21st, 1855, 9 slaves belonging to prominent St. Louisans were told to meet at the Bissell Ferry Landing. At that time, that was a good 2 miles outside the city. It was a wilderness, it was trees, it was, it was the farmers crossing across Illinois. So they were told to meet at the Bissell Ferry Landing. That night, the abolitionists in Alton had only sent a small skiff. They didn't expect 9 enslaved to be standing there. So the skiff was small, only 5 could get into the first load. Mary Meacham had told everybody once you got to Illinois, you would be landing in Liberty Village, which was a black settlement, and run through the trees to the plank road, and there the wagons would be hidden. So the boat gets over with the first 5 in it. What they did not know is the sheriff had found out their plans. The sheriff and slave catchers were there in the village waiting for them. And as the boat landed, they started to run like they were told, but then the ambush started and they started being shot at to be trapped by the river. Now, of the 5 that were brought back, one was a woman by the name of Esther, and she was the Henry Shaw's downtown, it is made at his downtown mansion. She had 2 young sons. Henry Shaw had told her a couple of days before that he had sold her to a cousin of his in Vicksburg, Mississippi, who was already on his way. Well, she asked about her sons, and Henry Shaw said, "You're going alone." So she tried to run that night with her two sons. Another slave that was over on the Illinois side brought back was a slave that was owned by Sheriff Maddox himself. And personally, I believe that was the weak link. So, maybe Sheriff didn't trust him, had him followed, who knows. But he was brought back. And then the fifth person was an enslaved man that was owned by Mr. Levy, the livery stable owner. Now, the fourth that was on the Missouri side, and this is really interesting, and the kids, when I do this in schools, they find this, just incredible. Of the four standing on the Missouri side, there were two brothers. They were teenagers, one 16, one 19. They're listed in the runaway notice as bright mulatto, which is interesting in itself. Henry Shaw wanted these two males back really bad. He was willing to pay over $500 a piece for them. The fact that they're bright mulatto is, let me just say this. Henry Shaw never married, but these bright mulattoes, he wanted back bad, okay? But he died before the bounty could be paid. And in his records, the bounty was never paid, okay? So I asked kids, what do you think happened to these two boys? Lila was also a runaway notice posted for her. However, that bounty was never paid either. And the fourth person that was standing on the Missouri side, the people who were captured couldn't tell much. It was so dark that night, you couldn't see your hand in front of you. And he, as the other 8 were standing there waiting for the boat, he comes out of the darkness and said, "What are you all waiting for?" And they said, "A boat to take us across the river." He goes, "Oh, good, me too." And he melted back into the night. They couldn't give a description how tall he was, what color it was, nothing. He melted back into the night. He could have been a runaway from the deep south that got as far as Missouri on his own. They know nothing about it. So they all told that Mary Meacham was the person who set it in motion. And Mary Meacham, by the way, it was the widow of John Barry Meacham, who created the first black church west of the Mississippi. They are still a seated congregation. So she was held much esteem in the community. They were going to put her in jail, and several white ministers and a pretty large group of prominent whites said no. Just put her under house arrest. She doesn't, you're not putting her in the calaboose. That's exactly what they called it. So guess what? The pages in the court document journal where all court cases are listed, the day of Mary Meacham's trial, those pages have been torn out. Some historians somewhere down the line took them out. So we really don't know the deposition of the case, though we do know she is in St. Louis in 1865 when the Civil War was well underway, because she, being a prominent black citizen, the commander of Benton Barracks. Now, you'd have to be a historian to know that Fairgrounds Park, the Fairgrounds Park, during the Civil War was actually Benton Barracks, the largest Civil War camp west of the Mississippi. It was the induction center for black men into the Civil War. In fact, in '63, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, when it went into effect, 40,000, at the end of '65, 40,000 black men had been processed through Benton Barracks. So the commander there knew that these black men could never get promoted unless they could read or write. So he contacted Mary Meacham and asked her, would the good social ladies come out on Saturdays to teach these black soldiers reading and writing. But the omnibus, or the public transportation in St. Louis at that time, was segregated. So the federal government and Mary Meacham sued the federal government So these black women could ride. And so they won. So only on Saturdays, and not just them, all black people could ride the omnibus. So she died in 67 of cholera, and we're not exactly sure where she's buried. We've checked all the black cemeteries in the St. Louis area, and she doesn't come up. So that, since I've retired, that's a mystery that I plan to get to the bottom of. We do the Mary Meacham celebration on the actual Underground Railroad site every October. And it's some part of history. This year it was called Wouldn't Take Nothing from My Journey. And we detailed the runaway escapes of 3 major escapes from St. Louis. So, I mean, if I had more time, another great story. But I think it's 5 after 1. So, and we're supposed to go to 2? Oh, all right then. Okay. Yes, sir.
Question, okay. You mentioned the Emancipation Proclamation, and I was learning more recently that Missouri, it really didn't apply to Missouri.
Right.
Yes. How did Emancipation play out in St. Louis during that time?
Oh, several reasons. We were an occupied city by the Union Army. They were very much concerned. The Confederacy, our governor had signed an agreement with the Confederacy that when the other 7 states pulled out, Missouri was going to pull out. They needed that westward transportation of the Missouri River that went across the state. And they had great plans of colonizing the West, Kansas, Iowa. And so we were an occupied city to keep that from happening. And when the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, it was only for the states in rebellion. Missouri didn't join the rebellion. Okay, so we and Kentucky were both neutral. And so they did not join. So anyway, what happened though, word got around to all of the plantations that if you could get behind Union lines, you were safe. Runaway, just by the thousands. Nobody stayed on the plantation. They ran away every chance they got. I've gone through records though where a slave owner in Troy, Missouri, put all of his black men in the barn at night, naked, and had a patrol around it to keep them from running away. So a lot of things happened to keep, but it didn't stop them. And if you notice or know, January 165, Missouri, by constitutional amendment, ended slavery. There was no slaves left, okay? And so they ended it, but the war didn't stop until April 65. So we were ahead of the game to emancipate slaves in Missouri. And that's how it played out. They emancipated themselves. Oh, believe me, I taught this. I know it chapter and verse. So any other questions?
Question. What made you develop this powerful one-woman act that just speaks to the soul and really tells history in such a poetic way?
Because actually, Lila was created for Rockwood School District 22 years ago. These brave souls out there wanted a new way to teach slavery. And so they called me, and I wanted to know what grade. They said 5th grade, and I said, "Can you give me a day to think about this?" And they go, "Oh yeah." So I thought about it, and I thought 5th graders would be kind of antsy sitting silently, so it has to be more theater than a lecture. And that's when it's pulled together, which at the end, I direct them to the WPA slave narratives at the Library of Congress, where over 2,000 slave narratives were collected during the 30s and 40s as part of the WPA. And so certain escapes resonated, and then the stories my grandmother told me. Now, nobody was telling our story. Everybody either had to be Harriet Tubman or Sojourner Truth. But what about out here, okay? And especially when we find the Mary Meacham story, Mary Meacham risked being enslaved because that was the law. If anybody of color were caught aiding and abetting, you were put into slavery. So she risked a lot. And we don't know how many escapes she helped facilitate. We only know about this one because it was only partially successful, and of the owners of the slaves, Henry Shaw, the mayor of St. Louis, Mr. Levy, these were very prominent citizens. And that's probably why the newspapers kept running, stories about it. But what's interesting is the bounty on the Shaw slaves and Lila were never paid, which means they were never caught.
I have a question from online. It says, do you know if Mary and her husband opened a freedoms?
On the boat, people keep asking that, and I would say I cannot commit to that. In all freedom school, yes. On the boat, not so much. St. Louis, I don't see how, and people need to be logical about this. When curfew, for example, was so severely enforced here, black folks had to be off the streets during the weekend by 10 p.m. Anybody caught that was, 15 lashes in a public place. The whipping post was beside the old courthouse. There were, the white folks wouldn't have allowed that. But Henry Shaw did own 2 boats, but they were used more by trade he was a cooper, a barrel maker. We know that he moved the raw materials on those boats. What I cannot commit to is what it was a school on it. And I would say half the prominent, historians, some believe yes, only because, and another thing, that was never, ever, ever mentioned until a woman wrote a book in the 1940s, didn't back it up with no material evidence, and just put it in a book. Undocumented. And I just can tell you how, with the Fugitive Slave Law passed in 1850, let me give you an example. One of the amendments to it stated that all good citizens are required to help slavers get their property back. So if I'm downtown St. Louis in 1852 shopping, I get into town only once a week to do my weekly shopping, and some slave owner runs up to me and said, I just saw my runaway a couple of blocks up the street and I need your help to get them. You might be the biggest abolitionist in town, but the law requires you to help him. If you don't, the fine was equivalent to the price of a farm. There were so many unjust laws around slavery, and that was one of the things when I taught it at Lindenwood. In order for slavery to have survived, it had to stand on 3 legs. It had to stand on racism, paternalism, and the rule of law. You take that away, and this 3-legged stool could never have lasted the 400 years that it did. You had racism, you had to turn people into objects. You had to set them apart based on something and color. So racism, paternalism, you have to have them under such control that they have to depend on you for the very clothes they wear, for the food that they eat. They were looked at as brainless children. Paternalism. And the last to hold it all together and to back it up is the rule of law. Now, if I had it to do all over again, I would become a rule of law scholar because, they issue PhDs for like 12th century poetry, and they ought to be doing one on slave law. It is said that from statehood to 65, the Missouri legislature spent 70% of each legislative session on the subject of slavery. So what else did they get done in the other 30%? This is how invasive slavery was. This didn't just affect the people of color. It affected everyone. Everyone. Everyone who bought sugar from a store, everyone who bought a bolt of cotton for clothing, everybody was affected by this. Everybody contributed to its ongoing because they needed that cotton, they wanted that sugar, they wanted that tobacco.
Question, are there any books you would recommend?
One that's hit the bestseller list right now, and it's called James. Just one word, James. I highly recommend that. Highly. Oh my God. And it's not a thick book. It's not even a big book, but it's amazing. It is about a really smart enslaved man who teaches, he speaks perfect Queen's English, but he holds classes for children on how to speak slave. And it's funny and sad all at the same time. But what it is, James is Jim, who's from Huckleberry Finn, and he's on the raft with Huckleberry, and every once in a while he slips into perfect English, and he forgets. so he's got to clean it up, and Huck looks at him and says, "Why are you talking funny?" So, but you read the book. Oh my God. Just called James. It is fascinating. Okay. But now let me tell you another story quickly. A woman by the name of Elizabeth, an enslaved woman who was a mulatto, and her father, by this slave, her enslaved mother, was the Daniel Boone. I worked out there for 14 years, and I can tell you, I had to force them to tell this story because Elizabeth was over in Marthasville, only 11 miles away. But this happened when her master's family and the Boones were still in Kentucky. Her master came out here at the recommendation of Daniel Boone. So Elizabeth will end up having 11 kids by 5 different white guys. So she must have been kind of good looking. But there's also, the idea of low-hanging fruit, okay? So out of these 11 kids, 2 of this nameless black woman at a farm in Missouri, 2 of her sons will become world famous. Do you hear me? World famous. I doubt if she ever knew it. Her next to youngest son was named William. And the white folks chose William because he's really bright skinned to work in the big house. They trained him how to be a house servant. He's not allowed to go to the slave quarters and ever visit his mother, though there are times when he sneaks down to see her. And when he's about 11, his master needs money, so he hires him out. He hires him out at one time to, God, his name just went right out of my head, to the printer of the Libertarian newspaper here. He was also an Episcopal minister, Elijah Lovejoy. Elijah Lovejoy, and he was apprenticed out to Elijah as an office runner. But Elijah taught him how to read and write to help him type. And so it's even said that a couple of stories that was written by this 13-year-old actually went into the paper under a pseudonym. But when the Francis McIntosh incident happened, the newspaper took the side of Francis McIntosh. Elijah Lovejoy at that point now becomes extremely unpopular. Anti-slavery people kept sending him threats, and one time they came to his office, beat him to a bloody pulp, and throws his printing press into the river. Now William is sent back to the farm because Elijah has to shut down the newspaper here, and we know he moved to Alton, Illinois, and thought he was going to be safe. But the anti-slavery people, because he was still printing anti-slavery stuff, went to Alton, shot him 3 times, and brought the printing press back to St. Louis again and threw it into the river. So his next hiring out was to a man who owned a tavern. And this man, you ought to read about it in Williams' autobiography on the beatings that he got because from this drunken tavern owner. And he was hurt so bad one time that his owner came and got him. So when he healed, now he's about 14, his master apprentices him to a slave driver. And he travels all over with this slave driver to farms, buying up slaves. It's William's job to put the shackles on them. And once he gets the boatload that he wants to go down to New Orleans, William, before they arrive in New Orleans, it's his job to rub grease on their face, put boot polish in their hair if it's too much gray, and rehearse them on what their new age is going to be. So this poor black teenager, this is his job. This is what he has to do. And so one day, though, Coffle, he had a group on a ship headed for New Orleans, and in the coffle is his mother. So with the help of several of the guys on the boat, he and his mother jump overboard. They get over 60 miles into Illinois, and they're recaptured. He, of course, is reapprenticed back to the slave owner. Slave owner thinks that since his mother was sold, he wouldn't try that again. And actually, he didn't. He was sold again to, now he's about 17, to another steamboat owner. And his wife thought he was, quote, so elegant that she made him their coachman. And so, but when the ship was up and down the rivers, he became head steward. And he saw an escape. The family was going to be in Cleveland with family over Christmas holiday, not Cleveland, Cincinnati. And he, in the middle of winter, ran away. And his story is actually compelling on what happened to him in the middle of winter, and he's only got cotton clothes on and no shoes. He figured the first night that he ran away, he got as far as 25 miles. He almost froze to death until a man on a horse sees him by the side of the road, sees that he's still alive, and told him to hold on, to hide in some weeds. He needed to go get a wagon to come back and get him. And he does. They get him back, him and his wife get him back to health. They buy him new clothes. And when they're getting ready to set him free, the couple ask him what his second name was. He said, slaves don't have a second name. And the white man says, well, I'm going to give you one. You see, that white man's name was Wells Brown. We are talking about the William Wells Brown, who will become the first black man to publish a novel in the United States that was actually published in Europe, but came a bestseller here as well. and it was called Clotilde, the President's Daughter. And really, it's about Sally Hemings because he knew the Hemings family. But in Europe, they thought it was just all fiction. So Elizabeth's second youngest will become the William Wells Brown, the writer. Her other son, he's sold a couple of times and ends up being sold to a lawyer who goes down to Texas. And they ride, because he's a circuit riding attorney through several courthouses, and they're kind of like on the road all the time. And Joe doesn't mind that, when they're back at the cooking. But most of the time when they're on the road, it's a lot of freedom there. Well, Travis gets involved with Texas wanting its freedom from Mexico. And he becomes General Travis of the Texas Rangers. And we know what happened at the last stand, the only stand, was the Alamo. Now, this is where Jim Bowie, this is where all of those legends are killed, at the Alamo. Joe said he was putting bullets in rifles, handing them to the Patriots, and sometimes he was shooting at the Mexicans just like everybody else. So, but when the Alamo is overrun and taken over, the Mexicans killed everybody in the building except for two, Joe and a white woman with a baby. Santa Anna let them live for two reasons. They were going to be useful to him. He took Joe and made him identify everybody that was there. And that was there. I mean, again, General Travis, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, all had him identify them to make sure that they were dead. Okay. Then Santa Anna took everybody out of the Alamo, had them stacked in a field, and set them all on fire. He was mad. Joe, though, Joe was the only combatant to walk out of the Alamo. And for years, Texas didn't want that history told, that this black man survived. But he survived because Santa Anna wanted him to go to all the other white planters there who were squatting on Mexican soil and to get their slaves to run away. That is why he saved Sam. The white woman, he wanted her to go to the next biggest town and to warn them to get out and what would happen to them if they didn't. So he saved those two. So Joe, the second son of Elizabeth, Daniel Boone's grandson, is the only combatant to walk out of the Alamo. Fascinating, huh?
Incredible. In your wonderful performance, you got injured. You got beat with a stick in the occupancy in '87. You said to people on 4. I'm curious, what does your research tell you about healthcare in the sense of what kind of injuries versus? I know it was brutal, but can you speak to that a little bit? What are the types of injuries? How do they get treated?
Almost every plantation had a some type of what we call root doctor, herbal medicine. There was, and it was actually a prized position. It would be like, head steward in the house. A lot of them, they were women. They delivered babies. They were midwives. I could tell you the story of, oh my God. Her name just went right out of my head, and she's called the Angel of the Rockies. Anyway, her mother died when she was 11, and they put her in the cabin with the plantation's root doctor. But this woman had never had any children of her own. So she started teaching, why can't I think of her name? Teaching her everything she knew. But it was good too, because by the time she was 18, the old woman died. And now they're sending this 18-year-old girl out to other plantations to deliver babies, black and white, people to set bones from broken bones. And she was sent out to do this. Now her master, whatever donation that he would take it or money. But white doctors, in this case, the closest white doctor was 40 miles away. So that every plantation had some woman, more than likely, who was midwife, who could croup for babies. I mean, knew all of the signs. But they're normally were trained from childhood and held in very high regard. And white people went to them too. I mean, there weren't any white doctors. Even though, and it was so interesting, even though in Kentucky, black people couldn't administer medicine to white people, except under extenuating circumstances, like no doctor close. So that is, and especially the big plantations in the South, where those plantations, are 1,000 acres apart. That woman, they had to have somebody with that knowledge, and that's what it was. But I can also tell you, one of the biggest killers of children during slavery was lockjaw. They would, they were barefoot. They'd step on rusty nails. They would step on things that would become infected. Lockjaw was the biggest killer of slave children. Oh, you're welcome.
I have a question. With your extensive research, have you taken to reading about Miss Jane Pittman?
No.
So I say that because I was told a few years ago it's not a real story. So all of my life I was told it was real. And a few years ago, I saw on Facebook that it is a fictional story of an enslaved woman. The movie was with Cicely Tyson. So I was just wondering, have you heard that? Is it real or is it really fake from what?
Did you say Jane Pittman? Oh, okay. I didn't hear the first word. Okay. I think her story was taken from the slave narratives. It was like fiction based on truth. Okay, would be the best way to say that. Stitching together Lila's story, some of it came. I might take one word from one slave narrative, two words from another, or two lines, and piece it together into something coherent. Because the average slave was sold 3 times in their lives, 3 times. And it's amazing. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Thank you so much for sharing of your knowledge and your narrative and your history. It's compelling, very moving. And as a nurse, I know there's been a lot of great contribution to nursing from the African American population. And Marcia, we know this, but as recent, the American Nursing Association, we have a president who was an African American male, which is a double minority. To have such a big post in the nursing workforce, it was really a great feat and really humbling as well.
Oh.
And, under his presidency, the nursing workforce nationally really was able to expand and become very innovative. So I just wanted to share that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I don't, there were so many black women who who really died in the Civil War. They became nurses. They ran off the plantation. They were following the Army. And so the Army started putting them to good use. They would, give water to the soldiers, help them eat, help them go to the bathroom. And it's supposed to be over 2,000 of these women who were nurses. In the Adjutant General's documents, they list them in kind of like what they did, but not by name. So they never got any recognition after the Civil War. But they died in cholera wards. They died from yellow fever. The same soldiers they were trying to save, they died from it. Clara Brown. Okay. Clara Brown was the 15-year-old doctor from Kentucky. And when she was 32, her entire family, she had 5 kids sold away from her. And she didn't know what happened to them. The owner that she stayed with until these people died would write letters all over Kentucky trying to find who bought her children that day. And they would get hints now and then, but they got a hint about one of her daughters. The owners had left Kentucky and come to Missouri. So Clara Brown comes here. However, the second daughter, a historian found just about 5 years ago, and this was, we're talking about, 1860s, 1870s, just found her in another, she was doing research on something else and saw that this girl had died from cholera in the colored ward of the field hospital. So we don't know what happened to the others, but we do know, but she was only found about 5 years ago. And that's what happens. You run across something that you're not looking for. And so we know where one of her children ended up.
Okay, a little bit more time. All right, so I was trying to do some research and understand the likely emancipation event for my paternal side of the family in East Central Mississippi, right during the Civil War, right in that time period. And we learned of stories about my great-grandfather who came over from Alabama. He was helping, I don't know if it was Union or Confederacy, but when the armies would come through, they would get they would take their stuff for supplies. But he was helping them hide their stuff. And they loved him for that. And that gave them money to come over to East Central Mississippi. And that's kind of where we, that's as far back as the stories we know. Like, what advice would you give me, to try to research and learn more? What sources?
So you're saying you hit the 1870 wall?
Yeah, that's what
Well, in historians, that's what we call it, okay, because we weren't counted in the census until 1870. But do you know who the plantation owner was? Okay, here.
We know the nun name, and we know a little bit about who that family was.
Okay, courthouse records in that county. I would check property records. I would check registered wills, because people of wealth registered their wills with the government. Okay. You could check newspaper. Family Search just put up about 60 newspapers from the South on their site. So if there had been any articles about them, but if you're lucky enough to have the slave family's name, most people don't even have that. I mean, that's a wealth. I mean, the courthouse of that county is where I'd go. Also, find his death certificate. You wouldn't believe how much information is on there. First of all, his parents' names, where they came from, okay? You can go back 2 generations just there, okay? Find his death certificate.
I have a question. So we're a Catholic ministry, and the Archdiocese has a checkered past with slavery, including one of our bishops selling a slave to the first bishop of Texas. Do you know anything about that, or really how the church address slavery, particularly here?
We have to go back to the Spanish in the Americas. The Spanish tried to enslave the indigenous people, the Indians, I guess you would say the Mexicans, the indigenous people. But the Catholic Church, well, first of all, there was an edict to all the Catholic countries practicing slavery. The Pope said, once they arrive in your care, you had 7 days to convert the heathen to Christianity. I mean, that's a papal bull, okay? The papacy was hitting the wall, getting these indigenous people to join the Catholic Church, because also they were being enslaved. So, and this is pure history, you can look it up, he issues another bull that you can't enslave indigenous people, but the Catholic Church approves and recommends using the heathen African. The Catholic Church sanctioned using Africans instead of indigenous people. So coming out of that, there's your answer. There's where it starts. There's where it starts. So here, College Hill, St. Louis University, and that spat, black folks have known for years that was College Hill. And that enslaved people worked at. It's only the white people in St. Louis University that refused to recognize it. And we have a slave narrative about a slave who walked back from, and this is like the 1880s, walked all the way from Alabama to come back to that Catholic Church. When you go across 40 into Illinois, there's a church that sits down under that overpass. We actually have a remembrance, an oral history of that slave who in the middle of the night was banging on the doors. And the priest, wondered what he wanted. And he said he wanted to come back to the parish where he was raised to die. And he had walked from Alabama, and he was quite old. Not exactly sure, he said, how old he was, kind of, sort of. But this is but he had been a slave, not at College Hill for the Catholic Church, but Florissant. Everybody, now is beginning to focus on, in fact, that was called Spanish Lake for a reason. And he was enslaved up between what we now know as Florissant, Spanish Lake. But the church, he somehow became attached to some way. He walked back, and he did die here because the church took him in. He could verify everything he said. So that stuff I find absolutely fascinating. But, slavery, when I say everybody was affected, it wasn't just the Catholic Church, because the Methodists split over slavery because one of their bishops was a slave owner and he refused to give up his slaves. And it split the Methodist Church. So now you have the Methodist Church at the time, and you had the Free Methodist Church. So whichever one you went to, this is huge.
I worked in Texas in that diocese that would become that diocese for Catholic ministry, and read an article. It's like the Bishop of St. Louis sold to this bishop. I'm like, yeah, it's not. So just reading, but it was an interesting connection between how the church dealt in this. This was in the 1860s happening. Close to it.
Yes, they did. But I mean, somebody had to feed those priests and nuns seriously. Seriously. I mean, this was a big diocese. I mean, I can understand it in a way, but they were vast amounts. You have look at Georgetown, look at, universities, and that's something. I sat on a committee for OAH, Organization of American Historians. Something research had not been done on slaves and the university, because a lot of these rich kids took their slaves, took their horses to college with them, and some to be taken care of. And then there were the slaves who helped build the universities. And nobody, and after Georgetown admitted their history, then all the universities started looking at it. I can tell you, I looked in University of Missouri, and only 3 slaves had been hired out to do some work on short term. That I couldn't find anything in their history that University of Missouri was involved, that there were any slaves involved. Now, building some of the Capitol buildings, I am positive of that. But we did look into the University of Missouri's records, by it being a public university. Yes, ma'am.
Someone in the chat said, can you retell the story of the lady who helped establish St. Louis? She thinks she was a fur trader.
She was a fur trader.
That's what she said.
Okay, read it to me again.
Can you retell the story of the lady who helped establish St. Louis? I think she was a fur trader.
Oh, as it turns out, her name was Esther too. Esther belonged to the Jacques Clay Morgan. She had been as a slave of a French officer over at Fort Kaskaskia, and he got smallpox. And, they lived out in the wilderness, and she could have just walked away and let him die, but she nursed him back to health. And as a thank you, he freed her. So she crosses the river into the new village of St. Louis, run by the Spanish, I might add. And the Spanish were very laissez-faire about slavery. You got it, you don't got it, okay? You can bring your slaves here, but we're not going to help you catch them. Okay, that was pretty much their attitude. So, and also, the Spanish believed in manumissions, and the French did not. So she came across the river under Spanish protection, and a woman on her own was in, and I had to explain this to my students, a state of unfree. And especially a black woman, you needed the protection of a male. So this male could use you any way that he needed or wanted, but you needed the protection. A woman on her own was a target. So Esther indentured herself to Jacques Clay Morgan, her and her sons. But in that regard, Jacques Clay Morgan was one of the biggest, with Soulard and Laclede, fur traders. And Clay Morgan Street down in the landing still exists. So Jacques Clay Morgan now has Esther indentured. So she was working for him and working for herself. And the Spanish, she worked enough, the Spanish gave her a massive land grant. It would take up the land, I would say, because it was way out from the city at that time, I would say it ran from Taylor to Union, okay? That's how much land as she eventually had. But to get to her land to work it, you had a lot of hostile Indians, okay? So, it was, but she did, her and her sons braved it and they worked it. So Jacques Clay Morgan was gone so much on his fur trade business that he taught her every bit of his business, because he knew he was going to Texas and he was going to be gone for a while. But I don't think he thought he was going to be gone as long as he did, because he was put in jail down there. But Esther up here ran his fur trapping business. If you talk to Esther, you were talking to Jock, okay? That was it. She became his surrogate. And in that regard, she had a lot of pull. When Jack Clay Morgan died, he put Esther as guardian to his 4 children. Now, again, she had indentured herself to him, but stayed with him after the indenture wore off. They were never married. She was a landowner under the Spanish in her own right, but when he died, he put her over his children. And that was interesting, because John Clay Morgan had 4 children by 3 different enslaved black women, and his first child was born when he was 71, after he retired. This, again, another fascinating story. But, okay, so if that's the story she's talking about, then she's talking about Esther. Esther, exactly. And she, was in the fur trapper building as a surrogate for him, for fur traffic trade. Now, also, too, Jack Clay Morgan, under the Spanish, he was made syndic over everything from this side of the river, okay? Daniel Boone was syndic on everything on the west side. Now, this black man has the same economic and social parity that Daniel Boone does during that time. But Daniel Boone's side was truly all wilderness, but Jack Clay Morgan's had the biggest population center, i.e. St. Louis, and the Spanish made him syndic. Now, what does that mean? Syndic means lawgiver. He is the authority, the last word on all legal cases, a lot of economic endeavors here, but the Spanish made him syndic. Again, he's syndic, same power as Daniel Boone on the west side, Jack Clay Morgan, syndic on this side. So, we have greatness in our past. From the very beginning of this city, black people had power. Black people, Jack Clay Morgan owned as much land as Laclede and Soulard. In fact, though, Anton Soulard was made the executor of the will, of Jack Clay Morgan's will over his 4 children. That's how close everybody was. The French did not believe in manumissions because they looked at their slaves as literally part of their family, because 9/10 chances were they were. They celebrated all the holidays together. The black side of the family, the white side of the family, and manumission was like a teenager asking for a divorce from his parents. That's the way the French looked at it. What? Are you kidding? No, you can't go. So yes, it's how the cultures viewed it.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give Angela another round of applause. This was truly awe-inspiring. It far exceeded, I think, the expectations. And we will be making this available to SSM employees on our diversity, equity, and inclusion site. Thank you so much for showing up today.